Okay, thank you, Keith. Our featured speaker today, John Boik, is the founder of the Principled Societies Project and the author of the book Economic Direct Democracy, a framework to end poverty and maximize well-being. He's going to discuss the local Economic Direct Democracy Partnership formed in collaboration with the Center for the Study of Governance Innovation at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. Principled Societies Project and GOVINN, I don't know, I should ask you how to pronounce that, are bringing together diverse global set of academic, civil society, business, government, and philanthropy groups to further develop the local economic direct democracy framework, the topic of his book, and to test it in live pilot trials. The LEDDA framework is a parallel local economic system designed to maximize well-being. He came to us recommended from an Oasis member who was teaching at A&M and said that he came and spoke to the class and they loved it. And I'm sure he's going to make sense of everything I just read to you, okay? So let's give a warm Houston Oasis welcome to Dr. John Boik.
Good morning, everybody. Is this working? You can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, kind of, sort of.
Maybe if I hold it closer. Huh? All right. My name is John Boik. As Mike said, I'm the founder of the Principled Societies Project here in Houston, Texas. And I'll be speaking this morning about the LEDA Partnership and the LEDA Framework, terms I'll explain in just a moment. The LEDA Partnership is co-founded by myself and Lorenzo Fioramonti at GovIn, which is the Center for Innovation and Governance at the University of Pretoria, South Africa. Before I even get off of this title slide, I want to frame our conversation just a little bit. This phrase, a more egalitarian world, this is a vision of what could be, not of what is really anywhere in the world today. And the word more does not refer to an incremental step. So I'm talking about a potential future that is fundamentally different than the present. Economic direct democracy is our proposed mechanism to achieve this vision. It's theoretical at the moment. The LEDA partnership will be starting development shortly. And the time frame for all of this, the time frame for development, for testing, for implementation, and for spread is really on the order of a generation. So this project might be able to improve the lives of some older people in this room. But the largest effect will be on the children and on children's children. I invite you to relax, take a breath, and engage your imagination. Open to the possibility of hope and change. And I will do my best to convince you that this vision is worth working for and even worth your effort, and that this mechanism, economic direct democracy, is viable and even practical given the alternatives. So let's start with just some terms. Egalitarian. Google says that the word egalitarian refers to the principle that people are equal in some sense. And we can talk in terms of economic equality, that is economic equality of opportunity, for example. Everyone should have equal opportunity to go to school, perhaps. Or equality of outcome, some prosperity measured in some way. Equality of distribution, everyone should have 2 cars and an iPhone. Or equality of ownership. The means of production should be, in some sense, shared equally. That's a little bit like the cooperative movement that's gaining some speed in different places. Or we could talk about political equality, equality of rights, or equality of power. The Economic Direct Democracy project is really speaking of equality of decision-making power in 3 specific economic arenas and for a specific purpose. And then over the next few slides, we'll talk about decision-making, economic decision-making, the arenas, and that purpose. So first, what is an economic system? I don't think that people normally think of an economic system in this way, but functionally, an economic system is a governance system. It's a way that a society makes decisions regarding what products and services will be produced, by whom, at what time, and for whose benefit, and using what resources. So every economic system has an inherent power structure. An economic direct democracy addresses, and we can say, an alternative power structure than the existing systems. So what are the existing systems? Essentially, every nation in the world today has an economic system that is some blend of capitalism and socialism. It's called a mixed economy. Some countries lean a little more towards the capitalistic side, like America, and some countries lean a little bit more towards the socialistic side, like Sweden, for example. And nations use a mixed economy because it works better than either one of the pure forms. The idea generally is to kind of blend the best of one, or allow the benefits of one to make up for the drawbacks of the other. Just to kind of, so we're all sort of on the same page of what these terms actually mean, I'm just going to cover a little bit about what capitalism is, what socialism is, in their sort of pure ideal form. So capitalism has a free market, decisions are made by individual actors, and that's really great because a lot of people taking their own steps opens the possibility for a lot of innovation. The interest within the capitalistic system is self-interest, strict self-interest. Resources tend to be privately owned, and the market, you can say that it's somewhat democratic, especially if the individual actors have more or less equal resources, more or less wealth. On the socialism side, decision-making is generally made by some kind of central planning committee. The motivation at the best is public welfare. Ownership of resources tends to be public, and there might be democracy in the sense that perhaps the planners were elected through some kind of democratic process. But both of these systems have, as I said, benefits and drawbacks. The benefits of capitalism is this sense of is this capacity to innovate, all these individual actors, and on the downside, you have a bunch of self-interested people trying to make more money for themselves, owning most of the resources, and then you end up with essentially with an enormous income gap, as we've seen, an undemocratic market because some people have more power than others, and well, as we know, money and power, political power, are entwined, so you can end up with a plutocracy. On the socialism side, on the upside, the idea is to work towards the public welfare, but on the downside, you have a small group of people in a central planning commission making decisions for far-flung cities and regions, and this planning commission might not be democratic and might be very much out of touch with local conditions. So the idea is to blend things. But capitalism itself, the U.S. tends to fall on the capitalistic side, and there's enormous problems caused by these systems. This is a chart of the growth in real family income. Over on the y-axis here is U.S. dollars, inflation adjusted. This green line, this is the most important line. The top and the bottom are the most important here. The green line is the lower 60th percentile of people in the families in the nation. And their income, family income, has really not changed for these people in about 40 years. There's really been no improvement. On the other hand, the top 5% class has seen just enormous improvement. And if I were to plot the top 1% class, or even the top 0.1% class, we would have a curve that just goes to the sky practically. this graph is showing how inequality has expanded over the last 40 years. So capitalism itself has rising profits for some people at least, but is getting some very bad PR. Some of you may have read the book Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty, very famous book that took the world by a storm this year. He essentially says that capitalism is an inequality generating machine and eventually leads to plutocracy, governance by the rich. Naomi Klein has a new book this year called This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate. She discusses how capitalism impacts our whole problem of climate change right now. And this quote by Pope Francis is just really powerful, so I want to read it very quickly. As long as the problems of the poor are not radically resolved by rejecting the absolute autonomy of markets and financial speculation, really the core of capitalism, and by attacking the structural causes of inequality, no solution will be found for the world's problems, or for that matter, to any problems. Very, very powerful words by the Pope. So, almost all nations exist somewhere in this gradient between socialism and capitalism, and we're really interested in this question, what's outside the box? What has perhaps some of the benefits of both capitalism and socialism, but hopefully has few or none of the drawbacks? And we would like to, whatever system we come up with, we would like to address or fix these issues: climate change, infrastructure decay, the Society for Civil Engineers, or it's a slightly different name to that organization, but the U.S. Society of Civil Engineers has given the infrastructure of America essentially a D+. The roads are falling apart, the bridges are falling apart. Income equality is terrible, as I've already mentioned. Debt is skyrocketing, poverty is persistent, pollution of the air and water is extensive. Financial crises have occurred recently, and there's talk by the World Bank and others of a potential another global financial crisis, and the problems just go on and on. So I've written this book recently in 2014, Economic Direct Democracy, a Framework to End Poverty and Maximize Well-Being. And the book describes what I call the LEDA framework, Local Economic Direct Democracy Association Framework. I use this term, LEDA framework and economic direct democracy, interchangeably. The book, as we've said, Mike said, is available for sale here, and I'm happy to sign it. But you can actually go to our website, principledsocietiesproject.org, and download a free PDF. So you can do whatever you want there. This is, the open world right here. By the way, Lorenzo Fioramonti, the fellow I mentioned on the title slide, he wrote a really beautiful forward to the book. All right, so what is the LEDA framework all about? The purpose of the LEDA framework is to maximize well-being. That's what the whole system is geared up to do, to maximize well-being. And by well-being, I mean this in a very broad sense. I mean social well-being, wellness, economic wellness, public health, environmental wellness, both for our current time and for future generations. That is very different. Maximizing well-being, I just want to point out, is very different from maximizing GDP, gross domestic product, which is sort of how our economy works right now. In the news, if you watch it, they'll talk about, is the GDP going up, is it going down? If it's going down, we got to do something. But GDP is just simply not the same as wellness, happiness, well-being. So to maximize well-being, this is a process. Maximizing well-being. First, you must measure it in some way, find some kind of indexes for it, which requires that whatever system we develop be transparent. There has to be a lot of data collection of conditions, computer models that forecast well-being, changes in well-being analysis, and so on. A little bit more about the LEDA framework. The scope is local. So capitalism, socialism generally occurs at the national level. The LEDA framework occurs at the local level. So city, we're talking city, really surrounding rural areas. But these local areas are globally networked, so it's both local and global. Participation is optional. This is not something that anyone will be forced to participate in. The strategy for spread is to complement and compete with existing systems. So it's a parallel system. And hopefully it provides products, services that are better than alternatives and therefore successfully competes. It's designed to be self-replicating, self-funding, and self-promoting. And in that sense, we hope that this will be what we might say a type of viral democracy that will spread from city to city to city. The local scale is practically the entire local population. Target population is the vast majority of people who live in the local area. I just published this year a computer model, and links to it are on the website. But in that computer model, the target population was really 90% of the local population. So what is this? What is this like? Something maybe this might help to kind of wrap your heads around the concept. It's sort of like, maybe some of you have heard of these things: buy local programs, shop local, local currency programs. I just want to say on the local, has anyone heard of local currency before, local currency programs? Just a few people, okay. Well, the rest of you might be surprised to know that cities like Ithaca, New York, the Berkshire region of Massachusetts, and probably a dozen other US cities, groups in US cities, have their own local currency. It circulates alongside the dollar. Not just in the United States, but this whole initiative has happened globally. There's a city in the UK, Bristol, that just had a big, in the last year or so, just had a big project implemented really at the city level. So in that case, the city is backing the local currency. The mayor takes his entire salary in the local currency, by the way. Local currency, open source, like open source software development, if you're familiar, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, socially responsible business models, open data, smart cities, participatory budgeting, and much more. So this is, the LEADER framework is designed sort of as a very large umbrella that can hold all of these things and more, but is integrated, efficient, and scalable to use by millions. The LEADER Partnership is developing the LEADER framework, and the LEADER Partnership is intended to be a global, diverse partnership of academic, civil society, business, government, and philanthropy groups, and the global public too will be asked to participate. Purpose of the partnership is to usher the LEADER framework through the development and pilot trial phases. We envision this as a 10-year, $70 million project. This is very large. So you can think of it perhaps like the race in the 1960s to put humans on the moon. This is a big, bold, and complex project. All right, so what is Aletta itself? Aletta is it's an acronym for Local Economic Direct Democracy Association. This is a membership-based community benefit corporation that implements the LEADER framework as an overlay to an existing local economy. So again, this is a local parallel type economic system. The framework offers all members roughly equal and direct opportunity to influence their local economy. In other words, it implements economic direct democracy. I mentioned very briefly earlier the three arenas for economic direct democracy. Here they are. The first arena is purchasing decisions in the market. You go to the store, and local store, and you buy whatever you want to buy. Second is funding decisions in a very special financial system that's unique to the LEADER framework called the Crowdbased financial system. That financial system, the CBFS, offers zero-cost funding for local businesses, zero-cost funding for nonprofits, local nonprofits, which could include schools, charities, research institutes, clinics, public services, and so on. And it also offers income assistance for the unemployed and those people who are not in the workforce. And then the third arena is voting decisions, formal voting decisions in the LEADER governance. This membership-based association governs itself through an online direct democracy process. So I want to just point out that these first two arenas really have to do with money. That is, people are voting with money. And the local currency system that is part of this whole setup uses money as a voting mechanism. That is not a traditional function of money. In some sense, this is changing the meaning of money. In this system, money is a voting tool. And because it's a voting tool, it's really important that over time, participants gain more or less equal income. Because if they don't, then some people will have enormous voting power, as happens now in the world, and some people will have very little voting power. The poor will have essentially no say. So for this to work, incomes need to become more equal, and there's a mechanism by which this occurs. All right, so I told you that I've published a simulation model recently, and these are just some of the results. The simulation model is not predictive, it's illustrative of how this system is supposed to work. I'm going to start this over just so I can kind of say how it goes, but this is the way it looked like on year 0, year 1. You can see the years ticking off there at the top. Year 3, there's a lot of poor people and very few rich people. The only people that are participating in this whole system, the lower 90%, the cutoff is about at 100,000, and this is this lower axis here is T&D, tokens and dollars. The token is the local currency, and it's assumed that the value of the token is about equal to the dollar. So over time, more and more people receive a higher and higher, more and more families receive a higher and higher income. Eventually, everyone who's participating, which is 90% of this county, US county of 100,000 people, eventually 90% of the county receives, 90% of the families receive an income of about 100,000 tokens of dollars. The other people who are up here, who started out making much more, they don't even join. Their incomes are not affected directly by this system at all. All right, so where does all this money come from so that everybody is making 100,000 tokens of dollars? Or I should say every family is making 100,000 tokens of dollars. This is, the system is complex, so I'm giving you really the broad overview here. But there's a virtuous cycle that happens. The community creates tokens as it needs to, so that's relatively non-problematic in a sense. They just make more money as it's necessary. That's one way. The other is that there's a buy local program, so people are encouraged in various ways to purchase from local stores, local service providers, and that keeps money in the local economy. Number one. Number two here end up expanding the volume of money in the local economy that's available, and then those gains are shared. The membership shares those gains with one another through this crowd-based financial system, the CBFS, which I mentioned. A very quick schematic of how this works. Again, this is kind of a simplified schematic. In effect, you have three main groups. You have organizations, which might be nonprofits, might be just regular standard for-profit businesses, and also might be what are called principled businesses, which is a socially responsible business that is unique to this LEADA framework. So you have organizations. The organizations pay wages to the persons who are employed. Other persons are either unemployed or simply not in the workforce. There's a crowd-based financial system that people contribute to, and the CBFS in turn also provides some income assistance for those people who are unemployed. They're called nurture engagements. And the CBFS also provides loans, subsidies, and donations to different types of organizations. So the currency flows around and around, and the computer model that we just published kind of illustrates how these flows are supposed to occur. And you've seen one result of that already. This is another result. This is mean family income, essentially take-home family income, with and without the savings that occurs in this system. So you can see that at the beginning, in year 0, the mean income of this population is about 40,000, mean family income. Over a period of about 28 years or so, that income more than doubles. It goes up by about 260%. And in addition to that, every family has on average about 60,000 tokens of dollars in this savings mechanism. So rather dramatic increase in mean family income. And this is the volume of money we're talking about within the CBFS. I want to point out that this community, this virtual community that the model assesses, has a population of about 100,000, so a fairly average sized US county. 100,000 people is not so much when you compare it to, say, to the population of Houston. 100,000 people, and by the end of this 28-year period, the CBFS is channeling about 2.5 billion tokens and dollars to local schools, local businesses, local nonprofits, and this currency is just circulating around and around. So we're talking about really potentially a massive amount of funding. And then the community has democratic control over this funding. That's the whole point of this. They have democratic control over how these CBFS funds will be used. It's kind of like participatory budgeting. So the community as a whole, the membership, can decide which nonprofits really help improve its quality of life, which local businesses improve its quality of life and provide the goods and services that are required, and so on and so forth. This is enough. This is really this volume of funding is really on par with what's currently what banks are currently loaning. So we're talking about a very, very large amount of money under democratic control. All right, some of the benefits of the LEADER framework then are innovation, because decisions are made by distributed actors. They're made by people like you and me who choose to become members. The motivation for all of this is well-being. There's well-being indexes that are assessed, calculated, and then the whole goal of this, if you think of the LEADER as a game, the goal of the game is to increase the well-being indexes, increase the quality of life for all who are participating. Democracy occurs in the three arenas that I've mentioned: purchasing decisions, funding decisions, and then informal voting. And then because the motivation is to improve well-being, there's better protection of the commons, whether that's the environmental commons or the intellectual commons or whatever it might be. There's a high degree of income equality that's produced, and the whole system is really hardwired for cooperation and transparency. So we are just getting started with this. The book just came out this year. The strategic plan was just formalized just a couple of months ago. Our first article in the lay media has just been published in Truth Out. You can read it if you want. There's links to on our website to it. The article is called Competing with Capitalism to Maximize Well-Being. The simulation model has just been published last month, I believe, in the International Journal of, should be International Journal of Community Currency Research. And there's a potential, the project we're working at right now, a crowdsourcing and crowdfunding campaign. We're working out the details. It may occur soon. Partnership programs within this 10-year, $70 million project. There's 6 main programs. First is academic. There's going to be about 50 academic papers published on really a wide variety of topics, from agriculture to political science to all kinds of different fields. The second is the core LEADER infrastructure, the software and policies that actually make this whole thing work. Third is kind of akin to a smart cities program, only in this case a smart LEADER program. Online tools and a LEADER game. This LEADER game is a massively multiplayer online game. The idea of that is to really spread these ideas out to the global public, engage people in kind of a fun way to learn about the LEADER system and to generate data useful in our academic programs. And then fifth is pilot trials. One pilot trial will probably occur in the US and another probably in South Africa. If there's funds available, we may do more than 2. And then lastly, an outreach program to tell people about what we're doing. A quick graph just to show some of the programs. Academic programs lasts through the whole thing. It starts with a couple of simulation models, better simulation models of the LEADER economy and of the democratic system, and finally ends with the pilot trials in the last couple of years. So we need your help in this, and I hope that you will be interested to learn a little bit more. You can do both by going to our webpage and signing up for the newsletter. You can write me directly if you wish, and please, feel free to look through the book and look through the website. And I thank you for your time. If there's any questions, I'm very happy to. Good, excellent. Please.
And helping out people unemployed.
Yes.
Or whatever, they're not having income.
Yeah.
How long does that go on? How much strain will it put on the resources?
Very good question. Okay, so
Could you repeat the question?
oh, sure. So he's asking, how long would you help people who are unemployed or not in the workforce? How long would this assistance? How much of a drain would it be on the whole system? Right. Good, very good question. And I want to preface my answer by saying that in our culture and in our economy and in our political system today, we generally look at people who are unemployed or out of the workforce as a drain on society. That is, to me, tragic, because these are human beings that might be actually participating in a variety of ways. For example, a woman who stays home with her children is having a very large impact, a positive impact on the society at large. Someone who stays home to take care of an elderly family member is having a very large impact on things. So the idea of this program is to engage people in any productive way, any positive way that they can be engaged. So the other point I want to make, the other preface I want to make to my answer is that no matter what country you are in today, something like 30 to 40% of the people are not really in the workforce at all for one reason or another. That is a lot. I mean, we're talking millions of people, tens of millions of people are not in the workforce, not just in America, but anywhere. So if you're trying to build a better world, if you're trying to build a more egalitarian world, you can't just ignore hundreds of millions of people. It just doesn't work. The only way to really do it properly, in my opinion, is to bring all of those people into the whole system. So to directly answer your question, I would say that these people are not a drain on the system. The system is designed, it accommodates these people. It's not a drain. And the computer model illustrates, it all works perfectly fine when 38% or whatever is in the computer model of people are not in the workforce. So it's not a drain at all. It just works the way it is. It allows people to, some people will want to stay home and take care of their family members. Some people will be disabled. Some people will be simply, incapable for whatever reason, mental reason, physical reasons, or whatever reason, to really engage in any meaningful way. But the idea of this is to engage those people who really can be engaged in a way that it makes sense to them. Yes?
Are there not incredible forces arrayed against this idea? There's people that are going to be upset about this, the people that own most everything.
Right. Okay, good. Very good. So what kind of resistance might this whole concept run into? At the moment, zero resistance, because I don't think anyone takes this seriously. It's very hard. It's very hard for the population to really imagine a better world. If you grew up in this kind of economic system, you were taught in the schools, you learned how to, grin and bear it through hardship and through a very dysfunctional world. I mean, climate change is going to potentially destroy civilization if we're not careful. It's not working the way things are. It's simply not working, and yet it's very hard to imagine a better world. So I think right off the bat, there's going to be a lot of people that just ignore this because they don't really believe there could be a better world. But I happen to believe there could be a better world, and I'm very serious about this. And so are a lot of academics who are planning on joining us. So this is kind of this whole concept is sort of designed to be a little bit viral. Starts with the people who can get behind this, and then it just grows from there. And I also want to say, there's a lot of questions, it's fantastic, and I'm talking too much for all your questions, I'm sorry. But I also want to say that this program, this whole setup, directly improves the incomes of 90% of anyone who joins. So 90% of the population should be, at least theoretically, should be in favor of this, because if they join, their income is essentially guaranteed or close to guaranteed to increasing relative to starting levels, relative to baseline levels. Yes.
I'm gonna have to. We have time for like one more
Oh,
question.
okay. Somebody in the back.
And
The woman in the red there.
okay, it'll be Michelle with our last question. Would you be able to stick? I mean, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
No. I'll stick around for a little bit.
Stick around, and we go. Some of us are going out for lunch afterwards, if you have time for that. But anyway, we'd be ready to do some more questions after.
We'll do some. We'll do some informal questions.
Okay, great.
afterwards with people.
Michelle.
And I'm sorry we don't have more time. Your questions are wonderful. Yes, go ahead.
If you're, so you're planning to give out sort of a tokens or local currency to the population, it's sort of like an equivalent bartering among the less wealthy. How do you stop like hyperinflation happening?
Oh, okay.
People? Certainly like the 40,000 to an average of 100,000.
Right. Okay. So her question is about if a community is going to be producing money, producing tokens, as we call it, how do you avoid running into the problem of hyperinflation? It's really an excellent question, and it's a question that deserves really a lot of attention and study by our group so that we can avoid those kinds of problems. But the short answer to that is that hyperinflation occurs when there's more money that can be used productively in an economy. So if we were if Aletta were to create so many tokens that they simply can't be used more than is really necessary, then inflation could well be a problem, local inflation at least. The idea of the token is to be inflation-free. So right off the bat, this is designed to be inflation-free, and there would be, with lack of time, I can only say that there would be mechanisms in place that would prevent a leader from producing more than they could possibly use. One of those mechanisms really is the computer models and all the data that's generated. If a community is producing too many tokens, that would really be quite apparent because this whole system is highly transparent. People would know right away what's going on and where the problems are. So, wonderful questions. I wish I had more time to answer them, but I will stick around for a few minutes and be happy to talk with anybody individually. Thank you so much.